Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and on this week's Field Friday segment, I thought we'd give soybeans their turn in the limelight a little bit. Last week we talked about some management decisions to be made in corn. We're kind of at that stage with soybeans as well. Soybeans being planted early, and with all the heat in June, they've actually progressed quite a bit faster than normal. We maybe talked about earlier in an episode, we had beans flowering in mid-June. We've got beans out here now that are R3, even actually a few that are R4 already. And R3 is kind of one of those growth stages that's kind of a critical beginning of pods, where we can do some management decisions that can probably help us. We talked about spraying fungicides and doing some things in corn with corn price being pretty attractive. Obviously we've got the same thing going on with soybeans with $13, $14 beans. Staying dry maybe, we're maybe going to see that market continue to stay positive for a while. So it's going to be worth investing in these soybeans as well. Surprisingly or not, as little rain as we've had this summer, the soybeans I think look like they've got really good potential. There's a lot of nodes. That happens when you plant early and they progress. They aren't quite as tall maybe as you'd expect with the amount of nodes they have, but that internode elongation as they were growing was slower because of the hot and dry June, but they were progressing. They just weren't elongating and stretching out as much. They have now, since the last rain, stretched out some more, but that still gives us a lot of places to put pods and flowers with all those nodes, because that's where they all are placed on the plant. So I guess our historical Innovate trial data is showing us around just a little under 4 bushel yield response on average with fungicide applications. I think if we've got really good yield potential, I think a little bit of a sliding scale might be in play with soybeans. The better yielding fields might have a little bit above average response as well, so it kind of makes it an attractive application with the commodity prices the way they are. Much like we talked about in corn, with fungicides you get what you pay for. The single mode of action stuff that's available, you know, the old straight headline and Quadris active ingredient, those types of things are effective if we don't have certain diseases show up, but we do have a prevalent disease that's gotten more common here called frog eye leaf spot that we already have some resistance to, and so I think we want to avoid those single mode, just strobilurin type chemistries. The strobilurin chemistries are important though, because they're the type that gives us that plant health effect that maybe cuts that plant's ethylene production, which is kind of a chemical it produces inside itself when it gets under stress. If we can suppress that, that helps that plant keep producing more productively rather than kind of pulling in its horns and not producing for a period of time. As far as, you know, the years gone by, we kind of had hoped to tag the fungicide and the insecticide application for aphids together. That doesn't seem to work anymore, just because, you know, we haven't had aphids be really a factor the last couple of years, and it just kind of seems like if they do come, they come quite late now. Especially with beans being advanced in their life stage right now. I don't know, we haven't seen any aphid movement yet to cause any concern, so waiting for that's not going to work if we're going to look at a fungicide application. We do see spider mites in quite a few fields, some worse than others, and with, you know, if we do continue to stay dry, we've talked about that before, that's the weather that they really like. They're really hard to identify if you don't know what you're looking for. You can't really see them with the naked eye hardly, but they do damage in numbers. When their colonies get to a certain size, they can really expand if that weather stays conducive for that. We dry out, get hot, dry, stressful weather, that's when they seem to flourish the most, and in corn and soybeans. I've got a picture here of a soybean leaf that has some small little colonies on. It's really difficult to see, but they're kind of like a little bit of a lighter colored, almost like there's pollen on the underside of the leaf. It's kind of got that light speckly dust look to it, but that's kind of what a colony looks like on the underside of the leaf. You do get some discoloration on the top side of the leaf if they're fairly significant. Haven't really seen that quite yet, but they're there, so the population expansion is just a few days away from the right weather conditions. They can start to be a problem. So having insecticide in that tank, if we're going out there with a fungicide, be aware if there's spider mites, and if you have those, we need to make sure that there's an effective active ingredient on the insecticide part of the game that'll take those out, or at least keep them from going anywhere, especially. There are a couple insecticides on the market. Asana is one that we've seen with certain conditions where they can allow for a spider mite explosion because they take out everything except for the spider mites, and then they have full reign to do their thing. So we want to be smart about what we use. The final thing is, if we decide not to do a fungicide, we maybe want to consider a cheaper treatment but still want to do something. We've got some pretty good data on a foliar micronutrient package called Max in Beans. We've got over 2 bushel yield response from a lower cost product. And if we wanted to maybe wait a little bit and see if the insects get worse or see if aphids show up, the timing on that is not as critical to be at R3. Soybeans are going to be really busy here for now. They're going to be putting pods out, putting flowers on for a while yet, starting to fill pods. They're going to have a lot of demands on that plant. So a foliar feed micronutrient has been pretty effective at increasing yield, and that can go on for a while. That could be something we say aphids show up in 2 weeks. We still can get some bang out of that application. We're probably past the fungicide window, but that would be something to consider. So we talked earlier about some of these stress mitigation products. They're still in play if we stay hot and dry. Obviously the beans are still doing a lot. If that's something you still want to consider, we're not out of that window, and if that stress continues, that might be worthwhile considering as well. So with that, I guess we want to just make sure that we've got a valuable soybean crop out here as well. We can still manage it and probably add some more profit to the picture. We just need to be aware of the decisions that can be made now. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.